nightmare gets worse. So it is with Igor's sign. When you get to tell someone off, you might feel pretty good for a while, but somehow the sense of righteous indignation and hatred grows, and it hurts you. It's as if you pick up hot coals with your bare hands and throw them at your enemy. If the coals happen to hit him, he will be hurt. But in the meantime, you are guaranteed to be burned. On the other hand, if we begin to surrender to ourselves, begin to drop the storyline and experience what all this messy stuff behind the storyline feels like, we begin to find bodhicitta, the tenderness that's under all that harshness. By being kind to ourselves, we become kind to others. By being kind to others, if it's done properly, with proper understanding, we benefit as well. So the first point is that we are completely interrelated. What you do to others, you do to yourself. What you do to yourself, you do to others. Start where you are. This is very important. Tonglen practice, and all meditation practice, is not about later, when you get it all together and you're this person you really respect. You may be the most violent person in the world, that's a fine place to start. That's a very rich place to start, juicy, smelly. You might be the most depressed person in the world, the most addicted person in the world, the most jealous person in the world. You might think that there are no others on the planet who hate themselves as much as you do. All of that is a good place to start. Just where you are, that's the place to start. As we begin to practice Shamatha Vipassana meditation, following our breath and labeling our thoughts, we can gradually begin to realize how profound it is just to let those thoughts go, not rejecting them, not trying to repress them, but just simply acknowledging them as violent thoughts, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of wanting, thoughts of poverty, thoughts of loathing, whatever they might be. We can see it all as thinking and can let the thoughts go and begin to feel what's left. We can begin to feel the energy of our heart, our body, our neck, our head, our stomach, that basic feeling that's underneath all of the storylines. If we can relate directly with that, then all of the rest is our wealth. When we don't act out and we don't repress, then our passion, our aggression, and our ignorance become our wealth. The poison already is the medicine. You don't have to transform anything. Simply letting go of the storyline is what it takes, which is not that easy. That light touch of acknowledging what we're thinking and letting it go is the key to connecting with this wealth that we have. With all the messy stuff, no matter how messy it is, just start where you are, not tomorrow, not later, not yesterday when you were feeling better, but now. Start now, just as you are. Milarepa is one of the lineage holders of the Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. Milarepa is one of the heroes, one of the brave ones, a very crazy, unusual fellow. He was a loner who lived in caves by himself and meditated wholeheartedly for years. He was extremely stubborn and determined. If he couldn't find anything to eat for a couple of years, he just ate nettles and turned green, but he would never stop practicing. One evening Milarepa returned to his cave after gathering firewood, only to find it filled with demons. They were cooking his food, reading his books, sleeping in his bed. They had taken over the joint. He knew about non-duality of self and other, but he still didn't quite know how to get these guys out of his cave. Even though he had the sense that they were just a projection of his own mind, all the unwanted parts of himself, he didn't know how to get rid of them. So first he taught them the Dharma. He sat on this seat that was higher than they were and said things to them about how we are all one. He talked about compassion and shunyata and how poison is medicine. Nothing happened. The demons were still there. Then he lost his patience and got angry and ran at them. They just laughed at him. Finally, he gave up and just sat down on the floor, saying, "I'm not going away and it looks like you're not either. So let's just live here together." At that point, all of them laughed except one. Milarepa said, "Oh, this one is particularly vicious. We all know that one. Sometimes we have lots of them like that. Sometimes we feel that's all we've got." He didn't know what to do, so he surrendered himself even further. He walked over and put himself right into the mouth of the demon and said, Just eat me up if you want to. Then that demon left too. The moral of the story is, when the resistance is gone, so are the demons. That's the underlying logic of Tonglen practice and also of Lojong altogether. When the resistance is gone, so are the demons. It's like a cone that we can work with by learning how to be more gentle, how to relax, and how to surrender to the situations and people in our lives. Having said all that, now I'll talk about Tonglen. I've noticed that people generally eat up the teachings, but when it comes to having to do Tonglen, they say, "Oh, it sounded good, but I didn't realize you actually meant it." In its essence, this practice of Tonglen is, when anything is painful or undesirable, to breathe it in. That's another way of saying you don't resist it. You surrender to yourself, you acknowledge who you are, you honor yourself. As unwanted feelings and emotions arise, you actually breathe them in and connect with what all humans feel. We all know what it is to feel pain in its many guises. This breathing in is done for yourself, in the sense that it's a personal and real experience, but simultaneously there's no doubt that you're at the same time developing your kinship with all beings. If you can know it in yourself, you can know it in everyone. If you're in a jealous rage and it occurs to you to actually breathe it in rather than blame it on someone else, if you get in touch with the arrow in your heart, it's quite accessible to you at that very moment that there are people all over the world feeling exactly what you're feeling. This practice cuts through culture, economic status, intelligence, race, religion. People everywhere feel pain, jealousy, anger, being left out, feeling lonely. Everybody feels that exactly the way you feel it. The storylines vary, but the underlying feeling is the same for us all. By the same token, if you feel some sense of delight, if you connect with what for you is inspiring, opening, relieving, relaxing, you breathe it out, you give it away, you send it out to everyone else. Again, it's very personal. It starts with your feeling of delight, your feeling of connecting with a bigger perspective, your feeling of relief or relaxation. If you're willing to drop the storyline, you feel exactly what all other human beings feel. It's shared by all of us. In this way, if we do the practice personally and genuinely, it awakens our sense of kinship with all beings. The other thing that's very important is absolute bodhicitta. In order to do Tonglen, we first establish the ground of absolute bodhicitta because it's important that when you breathe in and connect with the vividness and reality of pain, there's also some sense of space. There's that vast, tender, empty heart of bodhicitta, your awakened heart. Right in the pain there's a lot of room, a lot of openness. You begin to touch in on that space when you relate directly to the messy stuff, because by relating directly with the messy stuff you are completely undoing the way ego holds itself together. We shield our heart with an armor woven out of very old habits of pushing away pain and grasping at pleasure. When we begin to breathe into pain instead of pushing it away, we begin to open our hearts to what's unwanted. When we relate directly in this way to the unwanted areas of our lives, the airless room of ego begins to be ventilated. In the same way, when we open up our clenched hearts and let the good things go, radiate them out and share them with others, that's also completely reversing the logic of ego, which is to say, reversing the logic of soothfaying. Lojong logic is the logic that transcends the messy and unmessy, transcends pain and pleasure. Lojong logic begins to open up the space and it begins to ventilate this whole cocoon that we find ourselves in. Whether you are breathing in or breathing out, you are opening the heart, which is awakening bodhicitta. So now the technique. Tonglen practice has 4 stages. The first stage is flashing openness, or flashing absolute bodhicitta. The slogan rests in the nature of Alam. The essence goes along with this flash of openness, which is done very quickly. There is some sort of natural flash of silence and space. It's a very simple thing. The second stage is working with the texture. You visualize breathing in dark, heavy, and hot and breathing out white, light, and cool. The idea is that you are always breathing in the same thing, you are essentially breathing in the cause of suffering, the origin of suffering, which is fixation, the tendency to hold on to ego with a vengeance. You may have noticed, when you become angry or poverty-stricken or jealous, that you experience that fixation as black, hot, solid, and heavy. That is ally the texture of poison, the texture of neurosis and fixation. You may have also noticed times when you are all caught up in yourself, and then some sort of contrast or gap occurs. It's very spacious. That's the experience of mind that is not fixated on phenomena, it's the experience of openness. The texture of that openness is generally experienced as light, white, fresh, clear, and cool. So in the second stage of Tonglen you work with those textures. You breathe in black, heavy, and hot through all the pores of your body, and you radiate out white, light, and cool, also through all the pores of your body, 360 degrees. You work with the texture until you feel that it's synchronized, black is coming in and white is going out on the medium of the breath, in and out, in and out. The third stage is working with the specific heartfelt object of suffering. You breathe in the pain of a specific person or animal that you wish to help. You breathe out to that person's spaciousness or kindness or a good meal or a cup of coffee, whatever you feel would lighten their load. You can do this for anyone, the homeless mother that you pass on the street, your suicidal uncle, or yourself and the pain you are feeling at that very moment. The main point is that the suffering is real, totally untheoretical. It should be heartfelt, tangible, honest, and vivid. The fourth stage extends this wish to relieve suffering much further. You start with the homeless person and then extend out to all those who are suffering just as she is, or to all those who are suicidal like your uncle, or to all those who are feeling the jealousy or addiction or contempt that you are feeling. You use specific instances of misery and pain as a stepping stone for understanding the universal suffering of people and animals everywhere. Simultaneously, you breathe in the pain of your uncle and of all the zillions of other desperate, lonely people like him. Simultaneously, you send out spaciousness or cheerfulness or a bunch of flowers, whatever would be healing, to your uncle and all the others. What you feel for one person, you can extend to all people. You need to work with both the third and fourth stages, with both the immediate suffering of one person and the universal suffering of all. If you were only to extend out to all sentient beings, the practice would be very theoretical. It would never actually touch your heart. On the other hand, if you were to work only with your own or someone else's fixation, it would lack vision. It would be too narrow. Working with both situations together makes the practice real and heartfelt. At the same time, it provides vision and a way for you to work with everyone else in the world. You can bring all of your unfinished karmic busyness right into the practice. In fact, you should invite it in. Suppose that you are involved in a horrific relationship. Every time you think of a particular person you get furious. That is very useful for Tonglen. Or perhaps you feel depressed. It was all you could do to get out of bed today. You're so depressed that you want to stay in bed for the rest of your life. You have considered hiding under your bed. That is very useful for Tonglen practice. The specific fixation should be real, just like that. Let's use another example. You may be formally doing Tonglen or just sitting having your coffee, and here comes Mortimer, the object of your passion, aggression, or ignorance. You want to hit him or hug him, or maybe you wish that he weren't there at all. But let's say you're angry. The object is Mortimer and here comes the poison, fury. You breathe that in. The idea is to develop sympathy for your own confusion. The technique is that you do not blame Mortimer, you also do not blame yourself. Instead, there is just liberated fury, hot, black, and heavy. Experience and sit as fully as you can. You breathe the anger in, you remove the object, you stop thinking about him. In fact, he was just a useful catalyst. Now you own the anger completely. You drive all blames into yourself. It takes a lot of bravery, and it's extremely insulting to ego. In fact, it destroys the whole mechanism of ego. So you breathe in. Then, you breathe out sympathy, relaxation, and spaciousness. Instead of just a small, dark situation, you allow a lot of space for these feelings. Breathing out is like ventilating the whole thing, airing it out. Breathing out is like opening up your arms and just letting go. It's fresh air. Then you breathe the rage in again, the black, heavy hotness of it. Then you breathe out, ventilating the whole thing, allowing a lot of space. What you are actually doing is cultivating kindness toward yourself. It is very simple in that way. You don't think about it, you don't philosophize, you simply breathe in a very real klsha. You own it completely and then aerate it, allowing a lot of space when you breathe out. This, in itself, is an amazing practice, even if it didn't go any further, because at this level you are still working on yourself. But the real beauty of the practice is that you then extend that out. Without pretending, you can acknowledge that about 2 billion other sentient beings are feeling the exact same rage that you are at that moment. They are experiencing it exactly the way you are experiencing it. They may have a different object, but the object isn't the point. The point is the rage itself. You breathe it in from all of them, so they no longer have to have it. It doesn't make your own rage any greater, it is just rage, just fixation on rage, which causes so much suffering. Sometimes, at that moment, you get a glimpse of why there is murder and rape, why there is war, why people burn down buildings, why there is so much misery in the world. It all comes from feeling that rage and acting it out instead of taking it in and airing it. It all turns into hatred and misery, which pollutes the world and obviously perpetuates the vicious cycle of suffering and frustration. Because you feel rage, therefore you have the kindling, the connection, for understanding the rage of all sentient beings. First you work with your own klsha, then you quickly extend that and breathe it all in. At that point, simultaneously, it is no longer your own particular burden, it is just the rage of sentient beings, which includes you. You breathe that in, and you breathe out the sense of ventilation, so that all sentient beings could experience that. This goes for anything that bothers you. The more it bothers you, the more awake you're going to be when you do Tonglen. The things that really drive us nuts have enormous energy in them. That is why we fear them. It could even be your own timidity. You are so timid that you are afraid to walk up and say hello to someone, afraid to look someone in the eye. It takes a lot of energy to maintain that. It's the way you keep yourself together. In Tonglen practice, you have the chance to own that completely, not blaming anybody, and to ventilate it with the out-breath. Then you might better understand why some other people in the room look so grim. It isn't because they hate you but because they feel the same kind of timidity and don't want to look anyone in the face. In this way, the Tonglen practice is both the practice of making friends with yourself and a practice of compassion. By practicing in this way, you definitely develop your sympathy for others, and you begin to understand them a lot better. In that way your own pain is like a stepping stone. Your heart develops more and more, and even if someone comes up and insults you, you could genuinely understand the whole situation because you understand so well where everybody's coming from. You also realize that you can help by simply breathing in the pain of others and breathing out that ventilation. So Tonglen starts with relating directly to specific suffering, yours or someone else's, which you then use to understand that this suffering is universal, shared by us all. Almost everybody can begin to do Tonglen by thinking of someone he or she loves very dearly. It's sometimes easier to think of your children than your husband or wife or mother or father, because those relationships may be more complicated. There are some people in your life whom you love very straightforwardly without complication, old people or people who are ill or little children, or people who have been kind to you. When he was 8 years old, Trungpa Rinpoche saw a whimpering puppy being stoned to death by a laughing, jeering crowd. He said that after that, doing Tonglen practice was straightforward for him. All he had to do was think of that dog and his heart would start to open instantly. There was nothing complicated about it. He would have done anything to breathe in the suffering of that animal and to breathe out relief. So the idea is to start with something like that, something that activates your heart. So you think of a puppy being stoned and dying in pain, and you breathe that in. Then, it is no longer just a puppy. It is your connection with the realization that there are puppies and people suffering unjustly like that all over the world. You immediately extend the practice and breathe in the suffering of all the people who are suffering like that animal. It is also possible to start with the puppy or your uncle or yourself and then gradually extend out further and further. Having started with the wish to relieve your sister's depression, you could extend further and breathe in the depression of people who are somewhat neutral, the ones to whom you are not that close but who also don't cause you fear or anger. You breathe in the depression and send out relief to all those neutral people. Then, gradually, the practice moves to people you actually hate, people you consider to be your enemies or that have actually harmed you. This expansion evolves by doing the practice. You cannot fake these things, therefore you start with the things that are close to your heart. It's useful to think of Tonglen practice in 4 stages: flashing openness, working with the texture, breathing in dark, heavy, and hot, and breathing out white, light, and cool, working with relieving a specific, heartfelt instance of suffering, extending that wish to help everyone. The main thing is to really get in touch with fixation and the power of Klsha activity in yourself. This makes other people's situations completely accessible and real to you. Then, when it becomes real and vivid, always remember to extend it out. Let your own experience be a stepping stone for working with the world.